Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Rudowski of We Are Change.org right now in Tijuana, Mexico, joined, of course, by Jason Burmis. And in this video, we are going to be talking about the stunning, groundbreaking news that is developing right now around Bill Clinton's and Donald Trump's friend, Jeffrey Epstein. And that's why we're going to not only talk about the latest developments, the bigger ramifications, but what will happen as a result of this. Now, Jason, the bigger story here pretty much is the epitome of a George Carlin quote here, is that it's all just a big club and you're not in it. And the club is filled with Republicans and Democrats who are very closely tied into billionaire pedophiles. Jason?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're seeing people in the entertainment industry, people in the political arena, on both sides of the spectrum being connected to this guy. You look at Steve Bannon meeting with him just before the primaries. There doesn't seem to be a limitation to who Epstein will and can work with.
Yeah, now before we get into all of it, let's cover just the latest developments here, because you have to give credit to a media outlet that actually does their work. And the Miami Herald, that is breaking and made this story as prominent as it is, has spent a year investigating Jeffrey Epstein. And what they found out is absolutely astonishing. Now, of course, the mainstream media is running headlines against Trump's Secretary of Labor. But as we all know, this is a bigger story that involves many other people. Not only Donald Trump, not only his Secretary of Labor, but also Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, and a lot of other people who were on the Lolita Express going down to private islands in the Caribbean doing God knows what, and they were able to get away with it, which shows, and the story is just disgusting. Like, if you look into the details of it, there was a federal case against Jeffrey Epstein, an indictment with 53 pages. The Miami Herald was able to find around 80 victims just by themselves. The feds knew that there was 36 underage victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and all the charges were reduced to a 13-month sentence where Jeffrey Epstein was able to leave prison every day and go to work and come back and just sleep inside of a jail cell. It's absolutely ridiculous, because this man, according to many prosecutors, many police officers, many judges, should have faced life in prison. But he hasn't faced life in prison. He literally got away with it, and the plea deal that was struck with Trump's now Secretary of Labor actually got rid of the possibility of future prosecutions and actually shut down the FBI investigation that was going up against Jeffrey Epstein. And to me, Jason, this is just absolutely mind-blowing. Did I miss anything when it comes to the specific details about this case?
I mean, there are so many details about this case. I think it would be impossible to get all of them, especially because we don't know a lot of them. But for instance, Luke, you talked about how he got 13 months. He barely served any of that, and he was able to leave prison every day and supposedly, as far as we know, return that night and sleep in jail. I'm highly skeptical of that as well. But some of the things that I thought were really interesting that this did reveal for the first time is people that were associated with this case did more prison time than Epstein himself. Let me give you an example. The butler who worked for Epstein got a hold of his little black book. He then tried to sell it to different bidders and was caught. He served real federal prison time and then died in 2015. Somehow, that little black book, at least some of those files, have now made it through court documents, and we have seen them, and that's how we know that Bill Clinton had his number in there, Donald Trump had his number in there, and many others. This case is about to blow up if the media actually does its job and follows up on the Miami Herald and the Palm Beach Post doing their job for well over a decade now, Luke.
Yeah, well, of course, the media is running with the headlines, mainly attacking Trump's administration. But again, this is a story that is not just about a Republican. It's not just something that Donald Trump is responsible for. The left-winging elite political circles are just involved in this as the right-wing circles, and it shows you a lot of the upper echelons are extremely criminally connected. They all have dirt on each other, and I think a bigger aspect here that I think people need to be made aware of is when you look at this case, it's easy to speculate a bunch of crazy things, but it's not without a reasonable doubt to consider that Jeffrey Epstein possibly has dirt on other politicians that he is leveraging his safety on, because that's, when you look at the kind of the way secret societies work, the way top circles work. They usually have a lot of dirt on each other. That's why they have these rituals and skull and bones that are kind of embarrassing to later use against other people and to kind of have a safety net. The safety net that Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Kevin Spacey, Prince Andrew have, there's no other reason for these people to be connected to this person with his horrible track record of abuse that is documented, is proven. I mean, it's no longer an allegation. You have other media outlets just calling him a billionaire pedophile, and to me that is a correct analysis because around 80 people have come forward and talked to the Miami Herald. Some of the victims were as young as 14 who were either sexually abused, sexually harassed, or raped by Jeffrey Epstein. And it's just ridiculous that these people can't get justice because this guy's well-connected, powerful, and rich. This is the epitome of a story that needs to go out there, and for true justice to really be served, needs to be highlighted and pushed out by the greater public. That's my take on it, Jason.
Well, I got to tell you, even the Today Show yesterday, for the first time, ran a 4-minute video where some of the excerpts that the Miami Herald put together from some of the victims that are still alive, because in these articles it's mentioned, some of these women are no longer around. They've died from opioid addiction, overdoses. Remember, when you are essentially pimped out as a young girl, a preteen, a teenager, and you're in the sex working industry into your early 20s, sometimes you don't make it into your 30s, Luke. And this is...
Well, life expectancy is not high, especially with the psychological trauma and abuse that these women and these children are put under by these predators, and it causes a lot of psychological traumas that usually tend to lead to either suicide or behaviors that lead to death. So again, the violent, one of the worst crimes that you could commit is the crime that Jeffrey Epstein has been committing, has been getting away with, and there's no words to even describe the psychological, physical, mental trauma, spiritual trauma as well that goes through a person when they have to deal with someone like Jeffrey Epstein.
That's right. And again, this is not 1, 2. This isn't even a dozen. This is literally now 80 victims that they found. And if they found 80 victims, Luke, can we imagine how high that number actually is? It's probably well beyond that. So, Luke, let's talk about some of the newer aspects of this case, at least the claims that are out there. For instance...
Well, I just want to bring this up, Jason, really quickly. I am very skeptical because there's new information coming out today that allegedly Jeffrey Epstein snitched against Bear Stearns' former employees. I believe that story could be absolutely fabricated because we're not getting any kind of detailed information about who he snitched on or the exact ramifications of it. And I wouldn't be surprised, since Bear Stearns doesn't even exist anymore, that if that's just a totally made-up story by itself. But that's just my own personal theory, not based off any facts, just for the clear clarification of reasons. And there also is another court case coming up Monday, which is important to update people on. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, absolutely. And that's what I want to talk about, because they're saying in this article that basically one of the reasons he got this deal with Alex Acosta, the member of the Trump administration, is that he ratted on former Bear Stearns executives. Now let's examine that just for a minute. First of all, Epstein only worked for Bear Stearns in the very early 80s, and then he moved on to Tower Capitals International. Now, Tower Capitals International was involved with a huge Ponzi scheme where its head, who hired Epstein, Steve Hoffenberg, served 18 years in prison, Luke, had to pay restitution for almost $500 million stolen. Now, since then, when he got out of jail, he then started the largest Trump super PAC for president, $50 million. Still a mystery how he had $50 million after paying restitution. But now is currently suing Epstein, saying Epstein was actually the person behind that large Ponzi scheme. So there are so many developments now. Now, let's say, for instance, that he did rat on somebody in Bear Stearns. That could possibly be in connection to the documentation we've seen that he was an FBI informant and that he did make a deal with Robert Mueller. Is all of this stuff coming out because we're seeing pressure from Russiagate, talks of Corsi being indicted in plea agreements, Michael Cohen today pleading guilty to charges and saying that he has dirt on Trump. Is this part of that full court press? Because that's the only reason I can see the mainstream media going so hard with this issue that they've ignored now for over a decade, Luke.
Yes, we have to also understand here that everything happens for a reason, especially when the mainstream media is making a big issue out of something, because they've been ignoring this story. This has been a story that you've been covering, I've been covering. Only alternative media has dared to touch, other than a few small media outlets. But this is a story made prominent by alternative media. Now it's getting mainstream media coverage, so it's important to ask those questions. You brought up a lot of different speculations out there, and again, we don't know for sure because we don't have the direct evidence, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below what you think is the possible reason that this is getting mainstream media attention. What is the bigger kind of political tool being used here? But overall, I have to say, looking into the story for a number of years now, you've been researching it for a number of years now too, Jason. I'm finally happy it's finally coming to light. At least that is happening, and someone who is as big of criminal as Jeffrey Epstein is finally facing the true scrutiny that he deserves for the horrible crimes that he has committed to countless numbers of people.
Well, yes, Luke, let's just hope that it's not just media attention, that we're actually going to see a prosecution and then real punishment for this man and his cohorts. It's time for all you people behind the Me Too movement that have been chiming in for well over a year now to step up to the plate and say, hey, these weren't only women, these were preteens and teenagers. These were young girls that were taken advantage by the political and entertainment elite with the help of Jeffrey Epstein.
And there's going to be another court hearing just following next Monday, which of course we're going to be following closely. And stay tuned for more developments. Thank you everyone who allows us to do this work, do this research. Me and Jason are going to be following this story very closely. So thank you again for your donations, your subscriptions, keeping us alive and keeping us to be able to share the important stories that we are. And if you found this video helpful, share it with your friends and family members. Time to get true justice. Time to get this darkness out into the light, out into the public, and out into the greater understanding of, hey, doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrats, there's a lot of shady things happening underground that need to be dealt with. And the best way to do that, the best way to disinfect the virus that is happening all along our political landscape is, of course, light and sunlight and attention. And you guys are a major part of that. And that's why I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more here on youtube.com/we are change.